I get to put the handcuffs on him.
Okay.
That's what we decided, right? So, which, was kind of a big deal. We started talking about it, and they said, well, why don't you cuff him? And the guy I was in the car with, Clint Snyder, he said, but you got to use my handcuffs. So I said, all right, give them here, So anyway, the helicopter's following him.
Okay.
They see him leave, as he usually does, and they're calling in on the radio as he's traveling. So just as he's about to get to where we're at, we pull out behind him and pull him over. And he immediately pulls off to the side, like a good upstanding citizen would. Mm-hmm. And, the car, his work truck is kind of bum rushed, and Ray Lundeen, a KBI agent, grabs him out of the truck, throws him on the ground, and I handcuff him. So then he's walked back to a detective car with Lieutenant Landwehr's waiting, and they open the back door of the car. He looks in there, sees Landwehr, and says, "Hello, Mr. Landwehr."
Welcome to Hey Chaplain. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. Hey Chaplain is the officer wellness podcast, which brings you expertise and wisdom from police officers around the world. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are sharing their wisdom and experience so that you don't have to do everything the hard way. Today we are bringing you the second part of our story of Detective Dana Gouge, who handcuffed the BTK serial killer Dennis Rader. If you haven't heard part one, which told the story of a narcissistic serial killer who couldn't stop talking, then what are you doing? Go back and listen to episode 110 right now. Now, if you're still here, we left off with Detective Dana Gouge putting the handcuffs on Dennis Rader before the task force took him to be interviewed. Dana is going to tell us a bit about those interviews, but what I find interesting and what I think is missing from your typical true crime podcast is what effect it had on the detectives to encounter a truly evil man, to be the team working such a large case, and then to wrap it all up. So I'm going to explore those topics with Dana and talk about how that affects him now 20 years later. But first, let me tell you what I did not reveal in part one, the reason I know Dana Gouge and how he's become a friend. Dana isn't just a retired homicide detective. Today, he's also a chaplain. In fact, at the time of this recording, he's in the process of becoming a police chaplain at the very same agency where I serve. I'm really excited about the prospect of serving alongside him, and his background in both policing and now counseling, pastoral care, ministry, and theology make him an excellent person to discuss the topic of what to do when you encounter true evil. Here's Dana Gouge.
So they drive him down to the Epic Center where our office is, and we take him to the FBI office in the Epic Center downtown. Mm-hmm. And Landwehr and Bob Morton, one of the FBI behavioral analysis guys, are the two people that start the interview with Rader. They interview him for about 3 hours before he makes his first admission that he is BTK. And kind of got there from Landwehr showing him the floppy disk and saying, we were able to identify you from this.
Yeah.
And we got your DNA from your daughter's pap smear, so we know that you are BTK. And Rader is kind of irritated by this fact, and he touches this floppy disk that Landwehr had showed him and taps on it and says, "Why did you lie to me?"
He was hurt.
Right, he was. And it was like, Landwehr says, "Because I was trying to catch you." And he said, and Rader says, "But we had this thing." So exactly like they suspected because of his narcissistic personality.
Yeah. Now that is interesting that he wasn't one of those who really did want to get caught. He wanted to control his story, but he was actually kind of hurt and offended
that
he got tricked into getting caught.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So yeah, later he told us that he was getting rid of all his stuff, right? So that's why he was leaving these copies of things and whatever. Then he was just going to digitize everything, scan the items and put it on floppy disks, and then put all of this stuff like in a safe deposit box somewhere.
Right.
So, maybe someday someone would find it.
Right.
But not.
It's more of a legacy.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah.
He didn't want to be in prison where he is today.
Right. Right. Is he still alive?
Yeah. It's such a long story. And we talked about, a year and a half of my life in an hour.
Yeah. Leaving a lot out.
All right. There's a lot of, relationships that get strained. It was hard to come home and not tell your wife what you did all day.
Yeah.
'Cause, there were strict orders that we weren't to talk about anything.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Right. Because they didn't want stuff coming out.
Yeah. And even though he hadn't killed in several years, you didn't know that your own family's not vulnerable at home. I would think, especially Lieutenant Landwehr.
Right. Yeah. So there were concerns.
He was kind of the face of it. I would think, did he have any protection? Was anyone sitting on his house to watch him, to protect his family?
There were times when they did have surveillance on Landwehr's home.
Okay. Because putting him out there as the face of it, that's potentially making him a target. Now, that's not quite how Rader actually responded to him, but it could have gone that direction.
Right. So in one of the communications, Rader said that he picked out someone else to kill. And then he does like this weird kind of some theory of threes. And then he would say 3 words. And in one of them, he names Landwehr. So, when your name shows up in the serial killer's writings, you should have a little bit of concern. There's no way Rader would have known who I was from Adam.
Right.
But Landwehr, he, like you said, he was the face of the police department, face of the investigation. Yeah. And if Rader thought like the movies, if I can kill Landwehr, then this is going to go away. Right. Well, he would have been crazy to try to do something like that. But that doesn't mean that Landwehr wasn't concerned and that we weren't concerned he might try.
Sure. What was your involvement after the arrest?
Right. So I executed the search warrant on him. I took his DNA swabs and I took those immediately to the lab, which, within 24 hours they had matched to the cases. So we knew it was him. I took part in the interviews about the Vicki Wegerle case, obviously, the Catherine Bright case, and the Shirley Vian case.
And he's pretty openly claiming credit for each of these, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'd have 2 detectives in there with him. Once he started confessing, you couldn't shut him up. He just wanted to talk and talk and talk. Because it was such I think he had decided that, well, I guess I'm caught. I'm just going to take credit for everything.
Which included putting 2 more cases from 8 to 10 cases that he definitively said, these are my 10, and he had details and could recount them and
right.
everything.
Yeah. So once we learned that, he's also claiming these other cases, then we invited detectives from the sheriff's department to come to interview him about those cases.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have workable knowledge of those cases to be able to know whether or not he's telling the truth or not. During the process of this task force, we were each assigned a particular case. It was up to you to know that case inside and out. You had to know all the details. Now, one person couldn't know all 8 cases, every detail, right? So we had 2 KBI agents take the Otero case. And then...
which are the first 4 victims.
Right. And then another took the Bright case, and I took the Vian case. So I sat in with Clint Snyder on the Bright interview. He sat in with me on the Vian interview, and I sat in with Otis on the Wegerle interview.
Sitting down across the table from him, how do you wrap your mind around who he was and how he hid in plain sight for so long?
You know, we wondered whether or not he was some sort of a criminal genius, but it was clear that that wasn't the case. I mean, you can tell if someone's intelligent or not when you're speaking with him.
Yeah.
And he wasn't.
He wasn't some extraordinary intellect.
Right. Yeah. He was average at best. Honestly, I think that he was lucky. Things went wrong during his experiences of committing these murders, and he was lucky that he didn't get caught. I think that he was, I can say this now because I'm a chaplain, but he was being protected by Satan throughout this reign of terror that he had in Wichita, I think.
He hid in a church. He was given responsibility in a church. I'm pretty confident you haven't found any other serial killers in church in the last 20 years. How do you wrap your mind around the fact that this terribly evil person, proud of the pain and evil that they've caused, that person went to church board meetings and gave money to missionaries and whatever? I mean, it's the very definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. What is your reaction to that then, and what's your reaction to that now 20 years later?
As far as his involvement in the church, it was a cover for him, just like everything else. Being married and having kids was a cover for him. Being a Boy Scout leader was a cover for him. So
doing those good things was just part of how he stayed hidden.
Exactly. Rader says that, that he was possessed by demons. And I don't know if that's true, but I do know that he was influenced by demons because
he was demonic.
Right. Absolutely.
Whether he was possessed or not, he was demonic.
Absolutely. And you could just feel that being around him.
Yeah. What effect has that had on you? You're involved in ministry now on several levels. Was there a development over time in how meeting Dennis Rader affected you and your ability to trust people and to trust God, to trust what's right? There's a lot in law enforcement that breeds cynicism in an individual. And some cops outright lose their faith just encountering evil. You've not lost your faith.
No.
Why did coming face to face, you put handcuffs on one of the truly most evil people our society has ever produced? Why are you still a man of faith now?
Because I believe it's true. That's why. Why does anyone believe? It's because I believe that there's evidence to show that God exists, that Christianity is true. And these are the reasons why I have faith.
Someone hiding amongst a bunch of Christians didn't do anything to change that.
No. In fact, you got to expect that. Right? I mean, Jesus said that. All Christians believe in sanctification, right? Mm-hmm. But, in Methodism, there's John Wesley talked about a process, that we go through.
There's a method.
That's right.
Yeah.
That you become more and more Christ-like the more and more that you engage with God, right? And God breathes into us his love, and we breathe that back out to him in worship and praise and prayer and study, but also to other people through acts of mercy. So we have these acts of piety, of worship and praise, and acts of mercy for other people, and that's how we breathe out this love through the spiritual respiration. So that kind of spiritual respiration just increases your faith. It doesn't, and there's, once you know God, then, Dennis Rader or anyone else isn't going to convince you otherwise. Once you know him and you have a relationship with him, that he's breathing life into you, then I don't care who it is. They're not going to shake that.
I do worry that there are people out there who whether they're in law enforcement or not, they go through life assuming that the proof that God is real is that nothing bad has happened yet. And so as soon as something bad happens or they meet a truly wicked, evil person, and they're victimized by that or even just exposed to it, that whole belief system crumbles because now the safe little bubble they were in is no longer a safe little bubble. And they thought they had this deal that, well, I'll believe in God and God makes sure that nothing bad ever happens to me. And I think that's a terrible premise to base your faith on. I mean, if you read the Bible, Jesus flat out says, in this world you will have trouble. But he says, take heart, I've overcome the world. So there's not a promise that you're going to be unscathed. That, in fact, you're kind of warned the opposite, that you might suffer quite a bit, actually. And so I worry about young cops who assume that God is real because bad stuff doesn't happen to good people. And then they work the job for about 5 minutes and see the bad stuff happens to good people all the time. And that rattles I think the misinformed version of their Christianity, perhaps, that they had up to that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That if you believe just because you're a Christian, nothing bad's going to happen to you, yeah, you're really wrong.
Yeah.
And you got to expect just the opposite.
Yeah.
But, we can do all things through Christ.
Yeah.
Who gives us strength, right? We can endure whatever.
Be content in bad situations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Paul wrote to the Philippians, right?
Yes. Yeah, that passage is used out of context a lot. I can do all things. I can win the Super Bowl. The context of that passage in Philippians 4 is I can suffer, I can go through, I can do without, right. I can really be in a bad situation, but I can still be content. I can do all things like being content in a bad situation.
Exactly. So, right. Yeah. So that's how we are able to maintain our faith, even in bad situations, right?
Yeah.
Because, I've been blessed. I haven't had a tremendous hardship in my life. Not nearly what other people have suffered, but I know that if something happens, that I can endure it, that I can do it, because He who lives in me is greater than he who lives in the world, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Encountering a serial killer, finding him, capturing him, seeing him go to prison. How did it feel finishing a case like that?
At the moment, I was kind of overcome, right? I mean, what a relief.
Yeah. And
praise God that this has finally come to an end, because we can sit here and talk about it like it was nothing, but it was an extremely stressful experience.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I was where I was at when I was there in order to be used as an instrument to be a part of that investigation. But at the same time, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, because infighting in the police department, people, judging those who are selected to serve on this task force, to thinking, well, they're doing it wrong or whatever. Why haven't you caught him yet? It's been 10 months or whatever.
Right.
And then, the media kind of turning on you too and saying, why haven't you caught him? I mean, what are you guys doing? Do you have any idea what you're doing? And then you see all these blogs where people, these armchair detectives, they always know better, right? That we're doing it wrong.
And I assume just like the tips, all of the people second guessing, the reporters, the bloggers, whoever else, I assume zero of them had fingered Dennis Rader.
Well, you're absolutely right.
None of them had. None of them actually knew.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. No, none of them knew. If someone claims they knew, they're a liar.
Yeah.
Right? So, it worked out. Eventually he got caught. He was planning on killing somebody else. He told us that. He had picked them out, had gone over to their residence once to make the attempt, but there was like a road crew working down the street, and he thought it was too risky at that time, so he was going to come back later. So in the meantime, he got caught.
Yeah.
We had to work that. We stayed on that assignment on the task force until the court case was done.
Okay.
And then we went back to our regular duties. As a detective, it can be hard when you hear rumors of people saying stuff behind your back when you're working on a case, saying that, whether or not you were the best choice, whether or not you guys were screwing it up, all that kind of stuff while it's going on.
Yeah.
And then
cops are rough. The way they criticize one another.
Oh, absolutely.
It's brutal. Yeah. Sit down with a bunch of cops and they start talking about another cop. It'll get ugly real fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only way you're protected from that is if you're there.
Right. Yes.
In the group. I've seen that, right? I am sure I've participated in that too. So, but you know how it is. That's a good observation, by the way. So about 5 years ago, I really felt a call to ministry. At first I thought, I am getting the wrong message because this is Dana Gouge, the mean homicide detective. There's no way that God could use me in ministry. So I ignored it. And, for 6 months, I just said, no, I can't do that. But then finally, I mentioned it to my wife. I said, I really am feeling a call to become a chaplain. And my wife's response was, well, I think you'd be a great chaplain. So,
to your surprise?
To my surprise, right? So I thought, well, okay, she thinks that, and I feel like God's telling me this. Maybe this is something I need to explore further. So I contacted a hospice chaplain and talked to him about it. I ended up going back to school and got a master's degree in pastoral counseling and community chaplaincy, and started training as a chaplain at a Olathe hospital and hospice. And I got 1 unit of CPE through that effort, and then started working part-time on the weekends while I was still working full-time in law enforcement as a chaplain at the Kansas City Hospice House.
You still have a law enforcement job, but on the weekends, you're ministering to the dying in a hospice facility.
You're right, yeah.
Chaplaincy has a lot of different parts. Is that the part you were most drawn to minister to the dying, or to work in a hospital or a hospice setting?
I was drawn to hospice work and minister to the dying and their loved ones, because for a lot of years, I worked with people after someone had died tragically. Mm-hmm. And you can't minister to a murder victim.
No.
But this gives you opportunity to answer questions if they have them, that sort of thing, now while they're still alive.
That's connected with your past.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I have for lack of a better word, a calm presence, right? And that calm presence is helpful working in those situations. Mm-hmm. When you show up and you're calm, other people become calm. Mm-hmm. So while I'm doing that, I also ultimately get ordained in the Global Methodist Church. So I'm official.
Yeah.
And of course, most recently, I've been working on volunteering with your group in chaplaincy. So
become a law enforcement chaplain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got some experience in law enforcement.
Yes, you do.
That might be helpful when talking with policemen or witnesses.
At the time of this recording, you are going through the process right now to come on with our department. And if that all goes through successfully, and, Lord willing, I would personally love to see you connected to our detectives and our investigative bureau, CSI, all that group of guys, because my focus is on the patrol officers. And so I don't get to spend time with those detectives, and someone should. And we'll see. Maybe we'll steer you a different direction, but that's kind of what my desire is, to see you develop over the next few years, is time with those detectives and other investigators. That would, I think putting a chaplain there would be a very intelligent thing to do.
Well, hopefully I'll get that opportunity. We'll see. As a person that's a clergy person in the Global Methodist Church, I've been appointed a quarter-time position, which is unpaid, to One Hope Church as a congregational care minister.
Okay.
So I'm the pastor there for congregational care. So I'll do visitations to the sick. And my focus is on doing outreach to what we call the least of these, right? So one example of that is once a month, we'll load up stuff and go prepare a meal in Shawnee Park in KCK. And on a Sunday after church, we'll go there and feed anybody that wants to come eat. We have a lot of homeless people and people from the immediate area in the community come over there and eat with us. And we'll also, during the winter months, we were giving them coats and hats and gloves and that sort of thing. Just an act of mercy for them. Occasionally I get to preach at our church, and I always ask if I can do that, on or around Police Week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on May 18th, I get to deliver the sermon at One Hope Church, 9400 Knoll in Overland Park. And if you're a police officer, you're listening to this, I'd hope that you could come, because, I'll talk a little bit about some other experience I had in law enforcement and try to connect that with how we connect with God.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And this should publish a month or so before that. And so I hope someone hears that and gets a chance to respond to it.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
a good invitation. Yeah. I want to thank Dana for coming on the show. I love how he pitched the topic to me. He calls me up and says, "Hey, would you want to talk to the detective who handcuffed the BTK killer?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, of course I would." And he goes, "Well, that's me." If you've listened to episode 99, then you know that I have 99 ideas that I have not yet made into podcast episodes yet. And I am still working on those ideas. But maybe you have an idea for an episode. Maybe you know someone. Maybe you are someone who could share some wisdom with other police officers. Follow the link in the episode notes and shoot me an email. I'm always working multiple leads to develop the episodes that are coming up down the road. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain.
The guy starts to run. We kind of follow him, and two deputies tackle him on this walkway, and a general fight ensues. I run up to the guy's head area, and he sees me, and he reaches up and grabs my leg with one arm, and then reaches down underneath his waistband with the other, where the knife was. No one's got control over this guy's hands. They're trying to get control of his legs. He was a big guy, 6'1", 200 pounds, and they can't control him. They can't stop him. And so I gave it a little bit of time. No one's doing anything. And I knew right then, when he reached underneath his waistband, I knew what he was going to do. I have seen people get stabbed before. In my lifetime, I've seen it twice right in front of me, and I know how fast it happens.
Yeah.
I pulled out my gun. I told everybody, get out of the way. I'm going to shoot him.
Please make it your goal today to share this podcast with one other person. That's how podcasts grow, personal recommendations. Tell someone that you listen to Hey Chaplain, show them on their phone how and where to get it, tell them why you feel you've gained something from listening to the show. You are the reason that Hey Chaplain has become the largest podcast of its kind. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city. Oh, I had a question. Fact or fiction? Did Dennis Rader actually ask, while being interviewed, to have his coffee cup be marked BTK? Is that a real thing?
I don't.
Someone said that that's how arrogant he was, that he didn't want Dennis written on his coffee cup. He wanted BTK written. Is that, if that's even true?
I don't know if that's true or not.
All right. See, I hear all sorts of stuff. I'm like, man, that sounds like from a TV show. But there's several things about this that sound like it's from a TV show.
Right. So he's interviewed for, hours and hours and hours. I wasn't in there the whole time,
Right, of
and I
course.
wasn't watching when I wasn't in there.
Right.
He didn't say that to me, but whether he said it to someone else, that's possible.
Does that sound authentic? Does that sound like something he would have done?
Yeah.
Yes or no? Maybe.
I don't.
He was arrogant.
Right. He was very arrogant, but I don't know.
Overestimated himself in many ways.
Yeah.
But don't know about the coffee cup.
I do not know about the coffee cup. Right.
I don't know why a coffee cup in a police interview would have anyone's name written on it, which is why I heard that and was like, that sounds strange to me. But
right.
you're not at Starbucks.
Right.
I don't know why that would be,
right.
but you never know because sometimes it's the weird details that end up being true.
Right.
Right.
Well,
and so
I hadn't heard that, and I didn't. I didn't see that happen, so I don't know.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And but yeah, and if a cop brought me a coffee cup, paper or not, that has my name written on it, I'd wonder why.
Right, yes, I may not drink it. Yeah. Okay.